Hear me okay? No background noise? Okay.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Welcome to Resilient Voices and Beyond. I'm excited to have another episode here. I believe this is episode 17. It's been a journey. Started this January 7th and was like, I'm going to do it. And here we are. But I'm excited because I have a very special guest. I actually met her at a Shadow Day experience with NFYI. And I was like, I got to have her on here. So let me reach out. But I'm going to have her introduce herself.
Thank you so much for having me, and congratulations on 17 episodes. That's such an amazing accomplishment. I'm so excited, and I admire that you have interviewed so many stakeholders and well-known names out there in the child welfare realm. So it was exciting to see so many familiar faces and to be able to catch up with you again in a different capacity. So I am Cordelia Skeet, formerly known as Cordelia Cranshaw. Not sure how long I'm going to have to say that, but people know me as Cordelia Cranshaw, and I got married in 2020. I got married in 2020, so going on 2 years now. So where do I begin? I am a mother, I'm an author, I'm a coach, I'm a speaker. I'm formerly Miss District of Columbia, USA. And I think what's most important on this platform is I'm a former foster youth.
Thank you for that. Yes. In my experience of knowing you and following you and so forth and all the work that you've been doing, just knowing you to be a very powerful woman who has persevered through resiliency and perseverance in itself. I admire that. Like I like to do on all my episodes, because I don't like to just bring experts and people, with experience and just, talk about these different topics and so forth. I like to have you guys get to know them. And this is my little bit of way of you getting to know them and then having them share their experience and expertise. I think it validates them even more, but validates their experience and so forth. So without further ado, my first question, is, if you can give me a little bit of background of how you've came to be the powerful force and strong woman that you are today.
Wow, that's such a deep question that I probably would focus on where it all began. I grew up in Alexandria, Virginia, and I am one of 18 siblings. My mom and my dad both remarried, so about half of those are step siblings, but I grew up with the family notion of these are my siblings. My younger sister and I, we have the same mother and father. So that is the one that I'm closest with, is my younger sister. We're 2 years apart. And just, my upbringing throughout my life, my mom was in and out of incarceration. My dad was a struggling drug addict and alcoholic. And at 12 years old, my mom was sentenced to 10 years in prison. And at that time, well, actually, just like every other time, my dad didn't have the capacity or the means to provide for my sister and I. I actually first came into contact with the child welfare system when I was 5 years old. My sister and I were removed from my mom, and we weren't in the system for long. We ended up returning back to the community with a family friend. But when I was 12 years old and my mom was sentenced to 10 years, everyone was kind of looking around trying to figure out what was going to happen with my sister and I. I have twin brothers, and at that time they were seniors in high school, so no one really paid attention to what their living circumstances was going to be like. So I feel like I went through a lot of kind of what transformed me into the woman I am today between 12 and probably 26, to be quite honest with you. I know we always focus on youth who age out of foster care at 18 or 21, But from my experience, I did not really become an adult and successfully transition out of the foster care system until I was like 26. And I say that because I literally moved every year, if not multiple times a year, since I was 12 until I was about 26. And I was homeless. I couch surfed. I was in that survivor mode. I struggled. And it wasn't until I started educating myself on the foster care system that I actually became an advocate for myself, which led me to be an advocate for my peers and then an advocate for others. So just throughout that time, I faced so many different challenges that kind of shaped me into wanting to give back to others who were experiencing the same challenges that I experienced, whether that be better or worse. Being able to survive and beat the odds, which I also didn't know at the time. Like from my perspective, once I ended up in foster care and I had heard enough of, I'm going to be like my mother and my father, nobody's going to want me because I'm a teenager, I'm not going to be successful, I'm going to end up pregnant, I'm going to end up on drugs, incarcerated, hearing all of these negative things, I decided that I wasn't going to be those things and I wasn't going to allow others to determine what my success looked like or my circumstances to determine my future. And so I began to educate myself around what the child welfare system was, what it did, how it operated, so that I could navigate it to the best of my ability. And once I was able to learn that, that inspired me to go to school for social work. And I was, I had the privilege of completing my bachelor's degree at a time where only, 6% of youth nationally were aging out of foster care and earning a degree, a bachelor's degree. And then I went on to earn my master's by the time I was 22. And that percentage was probably 1% of youth who aged out of care. So that's just a little bit of background on some of the things that kind of led me to who I am today.
Thank you for that. You kind of dropped a lot of different nuggets and things where I can segue into.
Yes.
I appreciate that. So I kind of want to touch on one point, and then we can just go from there. You said you had 18. You're one of 18?
Yeah, I'm one of 18. So my mom has 5. My dad has 5. My younger sister and I kind of X each other out because same mom and dad. Then my mom got remarried and he had 4 children. My dad got remarried and she had 3 children. And then, in our culture, like, oh, that's your brother, so that's my brother.
Right.
There's a little bit of that going on. My twin brothers, they have 2 older brothers. And then one of my sisters is actually my half brother's sister, but my dad raised her. So my entire upbringing, I knew her as my sister. I loved her as my sister. And she actually took care of me for a little bit when my mom first was sentenced to 10 years in prison. So there's 18 of us. We do not spend the holidays together. We have, as adults, we have attempted to get together at least once a year. And I think that's happened twice. But we, we support each other from a distance, and there's the love there. So.
Okay. Did all of you guys kind of experience care, or what did that look like?
No, I would say we all experienced poverty.
Okay.
We all experienced trauma. We all experienced some form of a system, whether that be the child welfare system, juvenile justice system, parents going back and forth to custody, court system. So we all definitely experienced the system. My younger sister ended up in foster care. My twin brothers did not end up in care. They ended up being grown and 18 by the time they graduated high school. My mom actually was in foster care and my mom was adopted and experienced foster care.
Wow.
My older sister on my mom's side, she experienced the foster care system and also was adopted. So my mom had my older sister when she was 14. But my mom was adopted at birth. And then at some point, my mom's adopted mother gave her up and adopted my sister.
Mm.
So when she gets mad at me, she likes to say that she's my aunt and not my sister. But it is, you know how families, they get messy.
Right.
They get messy. So
Wow.
that's,
Yes. Man, that so interesting. So interesting. So your experience in care, was that in like, because I know there's different experiences. Was that in being fostered in a foster home? Like, did you get adopted? What did that look like for yourself?
No, I did not get adopted. And I think that for my situation, adoption wasn't for me. It wasn't meant to be.
Okay.
And I don't, now that I'm a professional, I kind of see things from a different lens, but looking back and reflecting on my situation, I don't even know that they explored adoption with me. So my mom was sentenced to 10 years in prison when I was 12. I actually didn't re-enter the foster care system until I was 14.
Okay.
And I had a very unique situation, and I feel compelled to kind of share this on your podcast, and I've never really shared it before, but I ended up being placed with my boyfriend at the time. I was dating a guy in high school, and his mother was there when they were, my mother was there. I mean, his mother was there when they committed me as a ward of the court. And she was just there as an emergency placement situation. But then the foster home that they sent me to, there were like 7 beds in one room. She was a daycare provider in her basement. She had her assistant in the same room. I left for cheerleading practice and I took all my stuff. And I just told my social worker, this isn't quite the situation for me. And so my high school boyfriend, his mom ended up becoming my foster mother.
Wow.
And so it was a very unique situation. And after that, after we ended up breaking up while I lived there, and it turned into more of an abusive relationship. So I ended up leaving that home when I was 16 in the middle of my senior year. And I ended up going to a group home. So I've pretty much been on my own since I was 16, 17 years old.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So you've had a bit of a journey, it's been all over.
It's been crazy. And the funny thing is like I always do these interviews and I kind of talk about the same things, but I've started to just elaborate a little bit more on different experiences that I've had, because I'm sure a lot of foster youth can relate to what I am about to speak to, and that is that we kind of experience a magnitude of traumatic transitions and challenges throughout life, homelessness, abusive relationships, suicide and suicidal ideation, mental health, reunification, just all of those different things that I have experienced. And I can kind of, write a whole book on that one particular topic. So yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot just looking back on it.
Yeah, thank you for that. Like and you brought a point to me. I was speaking to a gentleman named Cedric Riley. I interviewed with him a couple of days ago, and he kind of summed his experience up in like, I've had several different lifetimes and so forth. Like I had my first lifetime, this, my second, and then my, where my life really started to begin and so forth, when things start to look up. And I think of that really real, because we think foster youth, we have to grow up fast. We have to mature fast. And in that experience, we're experiencing so many different things: pain, hurt, homelessness, trauma, so many different avenues of things that you experience in multiple lifetimes, but we're experiencing that in one.
Such a short period of time.
Yes.
That's a great way to think of it. I never thought of it that way, but I agree with you. And I always tell the youth that I work with, you got to be 10 steps ahead of your peers, because with your situation and circumstance, you have to know how to navigate your way to success, to catch up in a certain area of your life as you transition into adulthood. But then I hesitate to say catch up because you're already 10 steps ahead. It's like it's this weird dynamic and balance that, you know, I think the system hasn't really taught you how to do that.
Right, right. And it's interesting, you know, I met you in an interesting part in my life. I had applied for Shadow Day, like, you know, a couple of different times. And I think this was about my fourth time applying, and I got it. And I was like, oh, great. So, you know, let's do it. But I was homeless at that time, like living in a whole shelter, like working 3 different jobs, as a mascot, as a clerical assistant, and as a student life assistant at my college. Like my life had took a turn. Like I thought at that age out, like I was gonna be great, you know, got an apartment, had a car, didn't have support, something happened, everything else folded in between. Next thing you know, tried to hold stand with friends, that didn't work out. And then as I was like, yeah, I'm better off at a shelter. And it was a very humbling experience. I don't take away from that, but I would never want to go back. You
Yeah.
know,
It's crazy because like they give you these apartments and I don't think they really think through, can we keep them? Can we afford
right.
them after we age out? The same thing happened to me when I aged out. I was in an apartment and I had to get rid of it. I couldn't afford it.
The apartment I got into was considered low income. That's what they sold me on when I went to them. And now as an adult, I realized like they were saying this was low income or some kind of subsidized, but it was $743 a month. This was before car insurance had been audited and stuff like that throughout the states and through nationally and so forth. I was paying $596 in car insurance plus the $743 in rent plus utilities. I didn't make nearly close to that. And like when one thing happened or I missed, you know, a couple of days out of work, you know, not having overtime and all the other stuff, it kind of, you know, swept up under me. So I kind of can relate to your experience in that. And I'm grateful that I met you because you kind of inspired me in that, right? And I'm listening to your story during Shadow Day and so forth. And I was like, you know, it was the reason I was supposed to be here. Like, you know, because technically I gave up my bed because you have to be there every day. I gave him my bed to go to Shadow Day. And I was
Wow.
like, I'm going. You know?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, there is power in timing. There's power in believing that everything happens for a reason. And obviously there was a reason why you didn't get selected year 1, 2, and 3.
Right, right. Yes. But enough with my tangent. Let me get back, you know, to the meat of this. So you talked about your experience leading up to, you know, 17 and so forth. You know, what, if you don't mind, did that transition into adulthood look like? How did you step into that? Did you step into that with some supports, a little bit of stabilities from the state that you were in, or were you just find your way?
I continued to receive services until I was 23, which
Okay.
those services was education training voucher. I think maybe I advocated for like them to pay my car insurance, maybe. I think my car at the time I paid cash for it, so I didn't have a car note. And so I soaked up any resource that I could at the time until I was 23 years old. My transition, so I went away to college. I came back to the area because I was thinking ahead, thinking of what happens when I leave, when I graduate from college, where am I going to live? If I come back now, I get an apartment, I'll be stable. Had the apartment in the middle of my senior year again at college. I had to give up the apartment. I was renting a room in my friend's mother's basement. And after that, I ended up moving to a roommate situation in DC. The following year, I had to move out of that situation and move into another apartment. I had to move from that apartment because that apartment was just not safe. And then by that time, I had been a couple years into my career, and I finally was able to get an apartment where after the 1 year, I renewed the lease for another year. And that was the first time since probably all my life, really, that I had ever lived anywhere for 2 years.
Mm. Wow.
And so that's where I feel like I began to thrive.
Wow. So, if we can kind of like piggyback a little bit, because I want to get the intricate,
Okay, let's
fine
do it.
points. So, starting a career, you started your career and didn't really have stability then. Like you wasn't in the best stable place. How did that look? And also, addition to that part of the question, what was mental health looking like in your life? How did you take care of that, during that period of time?
So I was always pushed to be in therapy growing up. I remember several different occasions being in therapy, family therapy, just having that therapeutic resource. So I knew that the resource was always there.
Mm-hmm.
I would always experience mental health providers diagnosing me and telling me I was things, or I felt a certain type of way based on the things that I said and presented to them that I didn't ever agree with. Looking back, as a mental health provider, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I've
Mm-hmm.
done my due diligence to be educated in this area, in this field. Were they accurate? Possibly. Were they spot on? Maybe, maybe not. But it wasn't until it was, my second to last year in college, I believe, or my last year in college. I knew I was aging out of care soon, because technically in Virginia, right, you age out at 18, but you can still receive services until you're 23, 21 to 23, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I was on my own at 18. They weren't continuing to place me, whereas where I work now in the District of Columbia, they will place a 20-year-old in 6 months, in 20 years and 6 months in a home with foster parents. I wasn't getting those type of services in Virginia. So I had been on my own after leaving the group home. I had to figure out when I would come home from breaks where I was going to lay my head at, just that long term, or just that stability with housing. I had to figure that out on my own. So I was receiving a stipend until 21. And then I believe I received ETV until I was 23, but I think something told me to like get in therapy. I don't really remember right now what it was, but there was just this moment and I was like, as I'm transitioning, I probably should do a little bit of therapy
Mm-hmm.
before I really tackle this adulthood world. And I remember going to therapy, and just every time I went to therapy, I was crying. I was sad. I just felt so emotional.
Mm-hmm.
And she told me that I was depressed, and I told her no. So I probably was stuck in my ways still of not. And I think as this person today, I think the reason why I was so adamant about not attaching my situation and circumstances to a diagnosis is because I never really wanted to be labeled, and I never wanted to make myself believe that I couldn't transform or heal from my experiences just because they labeled me as those things. And so I really didn't believe in those labels or those diagnoses, and I really don't today. So when she was telling me these things, I was like, no, that's not the case. I don't agree with you. And I was gonna, I think I ended up stopping therapy because I just didn't agree with how she assessed who I was. But there was one thing that I did take away from all of those therapy sessions that I had, and it was that I had choices. That was the biggest thing. She reminded me, or even taught me, that I had choices in life, and that regardless of my situation and regardless of who was around me, my supports, what life my parents gave me, that I was an adult and that I had choices. And that was just so vital in my life at the time, that knowledge, that reminder, that I had control. You know, it didn't mean that my struggles were going to go away or that I wasn't going to face challenges, but it meant that I had control over my healing process. I had control over changing my thoughts. I had control over who I said yes to, who I said no to, right? Because we probably, I mean, I won't, survivor's remorse. Okay, that's a whole nother topic that we can talk about, right?
Yes.
So when I was reminded of these things, or when I was reminded that I had choices, that gave me so much motivation, so much stamina to really just say, you know what? Yes, I'm going through the motions, because I think what was happening at the time was I was going through the motions. I was going to school because I knew that society says if you go to school, you'll be successful.
Right.
Not
Mhm.
because I thought that I should, I mean, not should, not because that's what I wanted to do. I did it because I had to do it.
Mhm.
So I was going through the motions, but internally I wasn't healed and I wasn't happy and I wasn't okay. And hearing her tell me that I had choices really, I think, sparked my healing process, because then I began to transform internally. And then another time in my life where mental health was very prominent for me and my transition was, my healing process was very intense, was competing in pageants, because then that was a goal where that was something that I wanted. I didn't have to win a pageant or compete in pageants in order to be successful or in order to get to where I wanted to be in life. Whereas I sought out my education as a means of, I have to do this, otherwise I will end up repeating the cycle. I will end up on drugs, homeless, incarcerated, all of those things, right? So I saw
Right.
education as my pathway to success, but me competing in pageants, I saw that as something that I wanted to do, to use a national platform to raise awareness to other people who had and are currently experiencing what I experienced going through the foster care system and all the other things that a lot of youth experience that don't even touch the foster care system. So that
Wow.
was a mouthful.
Wow. It's just, I do this, I've been doing this for a minute, and even just before having a podcast and having a platform to do this, I talked to a lot of different alumni and so forth. And I always experience this moment of like, wow, you know, other people are out here going through these things.
Going through the same,
And
we in the same boat.
right, and it just sits there on my mind, and I just, wonder, and I'm just like, wow, life is crazy, but it's also a blessing because um, we talked about your transition and so forth, and major points. You've been to school, you're doing pageants and all these different things. You were, if it's fair to say, you correct me if I'm wrong, you were still working on self while being a platform, being a person, not platform, but being a person for young people to look up to in these pageants and so forth, and it's crazy. I always think of it as crazy how, God, and the world works because you never know what your experience may do for other people. And I'm glad to be able to, talk to you now and to be able to, have you on this space and you being, in a place of honesty and vulnerability. I appreciate that because, my goal in this podcast was to be able to showcase those voices. And I say this, even if, you weren't a person that were silent and stuff like that, but to showcase the voices that were once silent. And I say that because we may have always talked and so forth, but we may not have always knew how to advocate. We may have not always knew what the right words were and so forth. But as we grew through our resiliency and through our own strength and story, we became these wonderful people, such like yourself. So
Thank
I commend
you.
you for that. Um,
No, and I commend you. Like I said, we're in the same boat and we need to continue. And I'm glad that you have a platform that you're doing this. Continue to highlight the success stories, continue to highlight those who have been able to navigate and transition into adulthood and beat those odds and not become a statistic. Because
Mm-hmm.
I know for me, that's all you hear is like the negative statistics
Right.
about youth who age out of foster care. And but there's starting to be more and more youth who age out of foster care successfully, and that's a great thing, but we still have a long way to go. And people like yourself provide that inspiration, I think, to social workers and stakeholders and foster parents to continue to support this movement. But most importantly, because I'm really big on youth, I know that each and every youth who experiences having to age out of the foster care system can find permanency, can find a loving family, can create their loving family that they desire,
Mm-hmm.
and to be the adult that they desire and wish to be. It is very, very possible. And my Survivor to Thriver Healing Toolkit for Youth gives youth those strategies. So what I did
Mm-hmm.
was I essentially reflected back on my life, and I, like, just like you, talked to a lot of youth, talked to a lot of peers, and tried to determine, because I always got that question, like, how'd you do it?
Mm-hmm.
And so at first I didn't know the answer to that, but then I started to reflect, and there are these 7 strategies that I believe I used and implemented in my life. And I guarantee you, if I talked about the strategies in depth, you would say that you applied these same strategies to your life in order to reach the success that you're at right now today. And um, I believe these 7 strategies are very vital to youth who are aging out of the foster care system to be able to heal from their trauma and to build relationships that support you, that motivate you, and that keep you on track. Because they say your net worth is your network.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that was the people and the relationships that I had, of the people who were positive in my life, that also helped me along the way.
Wow. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Um, yeah, yeah. I be wanting to go on so many different tangents,
I
because you
know.
inspire me
Thank you.
so much.
We listen. This could be a whole season of podcasts,
Right.
and we could talk through so many different things. It's just, you know why? Because it's our life,
Yes.
and
Yes.
life is all about, challenges and being resilient and having those moments that you reach, success, or you accomplish something that you sought out to accomplish, or even, accomplishing something that you really never even dreamed of, but it fell into
Mhm.
your lap as you continued on your journey to a particular destination. I always tell my youth and my little sister, the journey is just as important as the destination. And
Yes.
sometimes you learn so much on that journey that the destination may change, and that's okay.
Mhm. Definitely. I have a quote of mine that talks about that, taking heed and the lessons along the way, and so forth, because those lessons, although you may get like, a blessing, a sense of peace at the end of that storm or, struggle that you're going through. Um, I kind of feel, and this may be my own kind of personal opinion. I kind of feel that, that little bit of peace, may be momentary sometimes. It doesn't last, long, but the lessons that we learn, those are there for the lifetime, and you can always go back to those and find yourself back to that moment of peace and so forth, because life is, it's a constant battle, but you can enjoy it along the way, you know. So I appreciate that. I have a couple lasting questions, um, you know, and you kind of answered my first question, so I'm gonna jump into this other one. COVID. COVID has affected everybody. You know, I know you're doing your thing and so forth. How has this affected your life and the advocacy and the youth that you speak for and so forth through your experience in your lens?
So I will say the pandemic has definitely been hard, but I have definitely had some silver lining moments. I got married in 2020. We bought a home in 2020, and I had my son in 2021. So those were some great things that I have been able to experience during such a impactful time in our lives. But from a different standpoint, I have watched the need of mental health services increase. I have not been able to go out and be in person with the youth and the children and families that I work with, which I believe has had some type of detriment to their process and their life experiences throughout these last 2 years. My nonprofit had to be put on hold because we work in the school system, and we were an after school program, and the youth were just really burnt out with virtual schooling. And so we decided as an organization that we would help in other capacities and not transition our programming into virtual online learning. And that was because we saw that students were burnt out and they weren't able to take advantage. They weren't really taking advantage of the flexibility of virtual school. So a lot of our students weren't even attending school, which was impacting, their academic success. And so just being able to see that from a professional lens is disheartening. But I also think that the pandemic opened up our eyes to being flexible in the virtual capacity and to really focus on mental health, because everybody had to sit and stay still and be still within them and themselves. And I think that shed light on a lot of things that people were dealing with that they didn't really realize they were dealing with before. I'm not sure if you heard, but my Miss USA, Chesley Chris, committed suicide about 2 weeks ago. And I gave up my crown right before the pandemic hit. And she jumped into her career after Miss USA as the pandemic had started. And I mean, I think looking at a story like hers, who she probably, like, I know for a fact her upbringing wasn't like you and ours, comes from a 2-parent household, comes from parents who are, upper class, has a successful career, has accomplished many things in a short period of time, and has portrayed to the world on social media how joyful and cheerful and happy she appeared to be. I think the act of her and the tragedy of her committing suicide really just was a realization for me that this pandemic has really shown people what's going on internally with themselves. And then I also have had moments where I think about, the children and families that are struggling, that are just trying to survive, that are repeating that traumatic cycle, that are being abused and neglected within the home. So I think about all of those things, and I just, I've actually decided that I'm going to provide therapeutic services, because I think that has been the biggest thing for me throughout this pandemic, is just really focusing on mental health, which has always been the case, but I think the pandemic has really shed light into that.
Wow. You touched on a lot. You touched on a lot, and I use these words a lot. I don't know if you listen to any of my other episodes, but nuggets and breadcrumbs. You dropped a lot of nuggets there, and a lot of breadcrumbs, and there's a lot of wisdom, and I appreciate that. For kind of touching on what you spoke about suicide. That it's very deep, and the tragedy with Miss USA and so forth. I see this a lot. I'm seeing it being a trend, and our community as Black people, community of foster youth and alumni, and I think what COVID has done is exactly what you said. It has challenged people to face themselves in the mirror and see what's really happening on the inside. And a lot of people, are waking up, and a lot of people are struggling out there. So I wanted to take this brief moment on here and just say, like, if you listening and, some things that you got going on, just know that I care about you, and know that you do matter, and that there's help out there for you. There is
Thank you.
help.
Yeah.
You don't have to be alone. You don't have to suffer in silence. You don't have to put on that mask. If you really feel like crying, being sad, like, have your moment and cry and be sad. Like, don't, because the further you push that stuff down, it comes out in another light. So please, get help, utilize the resources, talk to a family member, a friend, a cat, dog, but still talk to a person too. Please talk to a person, and so forth. But please.
Yeah, I think everything that you said is so important for people to hear. And what I recognize is that I know in those moments, it is hard for people to talk about the struggle that they're going through.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to remind them that talking about it helps. The more you talk about it, the easier it gets.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny because in the last couple of months, I've had 2 people kind of tell me that, I'm like, just because I've healed, or everyone's not like you. And I've taken offense to that, because at one point in my life, it was hard for me to talk about it. At one point in my life, I was suicidal, and I did have a suicide attempt. At one point in my life, I didn't use therapy to the best of my ability and to make it work for me. I was there. And I've worked really hard to get to where I am today, in terms of knowing my triggers, thinking deep into my subconscious about why I'm feeling some type of way when I don't have necessarily a legitimate reason at the moment to feel that way.
Right.
And I think that we have to begin to take responsibility for what's going on internally. And we cannot expect things to change if we're not willing to do the work and put in that time.
Definitely.
And I mean, it's kind of like that tough love thing, right? Like, it's like you don't really want to hear it, and it may sound disheartening, but it's true. Nobody has control over what's going on internally with you but yourself. And I've had to, the healing process isn't linear, and it's a roller coaster. You have ups and downs, you have ebbs and flows. And for me, my healing process is still going. I'm still healing. Every transition, every new experience that I face likely brings up something from my traumatic past. Me being married, how many times I was going to sabotage that? Me becoming a mom. I've only been a mom for 4 months, not even 4 months yet. That brought up a lot of emotions and a lot of challenges. And I just know me raising him into his adulthood is going to bring up even more challenges as I continue to maneuver through this role. So I hope that as I share my experiences of healing and people hear what I'm saying, that the biggest thing that they take away, which was one of the things that I took away from my therapist, was that we all have choices.
Yes. Wow. Thank you for that. You said one thing, and as you're getting to know me a little bit deeper and so forth, one thing I'm gonna say about myself, I'm a person that, like, it needs to get done. We need to talk about it. So what I'm gonna say to you guys as the listeners and so forth is, like, we've had so much stuff happen to us these past couple years. We do not need to do any more harm to ourselves. It's time to break the mold. It's time to break those generational things that has been carrying you, your family, and onto you, and you're passing down to your kids possibly. It's time to throw that out the window. Get help, talk to people, get out your little bubble and so
Yeah.
forth.
Change that
And
culture.
yes, yes. Because I come from a culture where, the Black culture, where you either pray about it or we ain't gonna talk about it, or it stays in the family. And that has not helped me in no sense.
Exactly.
Prayer has. I'm gonna say prayer has to a certain extent, but I still has went and got mental health services. Because I know it's not just you can't pray, and I think of this faith without works is dead. Like, I can't just have my faith and not do what I need to do. I have to work on that. I have to go out there and get it, and so forth. So, let's go into 2022, and I'm gonna say let's go into it because we only like a month or so in,
Exactly.
We got a couple more months going, breaking those modes and breaking those habits that we have of self-sabotage. And I'm not going to say it's just a thing with foster care youth. We as a people have a habit of sabotaging things when things look good, and so forth, and I have to get out of the mindset within poverty, within struggle, and so forth, because poverty can be addictive. Struggling can be addictive. If all you knew is dysfunction, instability, and so forth, how do you find peace and stability? So that's my little rant and so forth. I know we only got a little bit of time left. And I want to ask you two last questions. Well, the first one is really a statement for you. But what tips and tidbits do you have for young professionals and alumni or youth that are in care and so forth?
Give yourself grace. Take the time that you need. Do not rush the process. And always remember the bigger picture. There are going to be times where you have to make sacrifices and you're going to have to do things that you might not want to do in that moment, but you know you have to do them in order to accomplish and reach your ultimate goal.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that. And kind of my last question is, what's next for you? What's next on this journey of life?
So I have published a healing toolkit for youth called Survivor to Thriver. It's a 2-part toolkit. The first part is focused on the youth, them applying these strategies to their life, me helping them and coaching them in a life coach capacity in a way that will allow them to transform their pathway to success and transition into adulthood, allow them to begin their healing process and to build relationships with people who support them and want to see them succeed. Through this healing toolkit, they will learn about the art of forgiveness. They'll learn how to prepare for adulthood and for their transition. And they get to learn how I did it, how I applied these steps to my life so that they can uniquely apply them to their life. That's volume 1. Volume 2 is geared towards the people that support the youth. who are going through the coaching program, and it's for their supporters to understand how these strategies can be implemented and how they can take a role of a supportive adult in order to help them implement their strategies. And then I'm in the process of actually writing a book, not about my life, but just about my unique perspective of living through the foster care system, aging out of foster care, and now being a professional social worker and what I see in my day-to-day work, and kind of just like a message to everyone in that community on how we can continue to see families succeed. I think I talked a little bit about how I'm reunified with my family, and that wasn't through the foster care system, but most youth who age out of foster care likely reunify in some kind of capacity with their biological family. And so are we preparing them for that? What does that look like? So I am just trying to get everything out of my head into the world so that we can continue to hear success stories like yours, like mine, and continue to see people thrive.
Wow, thank you for that. It's been a pleasure having you on here. It's great to see you again.
This was a good Friday afternoon session.
Yes. I would love to have you back, and talk about some of those in-depth topics that, we touched on and so forth. Wow. And any last thoughts? Any last?
Nope.
Okay. So I'm kind of starting this a trend. I let had a couple, two other people do this, and I didn't really think to do this, but I think it makes sense. How can people stay in tune with you, get in touch with you, follow your journey, and so forth?
Yeah, follow me on social media. Sad I don't know my handles. Let me. You gonna chop and screw this, right? Okay.
For you guys, I am gonna tag her, when I post this and so forth and everything to kind of help her out and so forth. But follow her on social media. I don't know if she's still kind of doing speaking things, but get a hold of her, and so forth, and chop it up with her if you would like to, book her or whatever, and so forth. I'm trying to help get us in there.
Yes. So survivortothriver.org, ark-dc.org are my two websites where you can book me, get in contact with me. Follow me on social media, Cordelia D. Cranshaw. That's Cranshaw with an A, not an E. And yes, let's stay in touch. Let's continue to build. Let's continue to help children and families.
Thank you. Well, this is Resilient Voices and Beyond. I'm so thankful for you being on here. Thankful for your vulnerability, your honesty, and your wisdom, and your experience and expertise. It is a pleasure to be able to speak with someone that had inspired me in places of my life when I wasn't at my best, to be able to continue to excel and reach further for myself. So I want to thank you for that on a personal level, and just thank you for doing this. Lastly, you guys know the pandemic is real. It is here and it may not be going nowhere, so please stay safe. If you're vaccinated, great, please still wear a mask, because that doesn't mean anything. Please still wear a mask, sanitize, wash your hands. If you're not vaccinated, that is your choice, that's your prerogative, but please take the right precautions to ensure the safety of your community and your family and so forth. We got to do this together. It takes a village. And yeah, if we ain't all right, what we gonna do? So thank you guys. You guys have a great night, great evening, great morning. Whatever you listening to this, just let it be great. And this is Resilient Voices and Beyond. Thank you for listening.